Morning, it's time to start our class together. I want to welcome everyone here and appreciate your presence. It's a beautiful day out, a little chilly, but you can expect that here in March as we're wrapping up the month here, one more week. I think this is also the first Lord's Day of spring this year, so happy spring to you. We're studying in the book of Genesis in this class, if you'd like to be turning there in your Bible. And this morning, we're going to be at Genesis chapter 29, which we started last week, so we'll read through some of these first few verses, pass through that somewhat quickly, and then slow down just a tad. Although I was talking with Brother Don about our class and scheduling and so on, and we are going to pick up the pace just a bit here at the end of the book, and we're going to pick it up quite a bit in the next book, Exodus. We won't read all of the verses in class in the book of Exodus. We'll handle it more in summary, some paragraphs, but in other places we will try to slow down and notice them verse by verse. So you can be planning in your personal study, read ahead, read the whole book of Genesis. It's 40 chapters, Exodus, but we'll be a few weeks yet here in the book of Genesis. We do have some visitors with us this morning. We're grateful for that. Glad you've come our way. Some of you have traveled many miles to be with us today. Actually, you came for other reasons too, but we're honored that you're here, and we're glad that you're with us today. We're going to be led in word of prayer, and then we'll begin our study. Brother Don, would you start us with prayer, please?
Let's bow together. Father, we thank you for the blessing we have in being able to approach you in prayer. We thank you that you care, that you have done so much to prepare a way for us that there might be hope for the future. And we ask, Father, that you help us this morning as we approach the study of your word, that you'd help us to recognize the messages that you have put there for us, to recognize the teaching, the things that will help us to be more pleasing in your sight. We pray for your blessings on Bob as he leads our minds, that he might point out those things that we need to hear to help us to be better servants. For we ask these things in Christ's name. Amen.
As we move through the book of Genesis, it's helpful, I think, to remember the purpose that these books are written. The key word of the Bible is salvation. Salvation in Jesus Christ. Every book in the Bible points to Jesus Christ. When we read about Jacob and his 12 sons, for example, the 12 patriarchs, as they're called, there's a reason why these details are recorded. These things were written for our learning. They were written so that we might have a greater appreciation of and understanding of Jesus Christ. It's not just good history reading, although it is that. It has a purpose that affects us daily in life and eternity. So it's very important that we try to grasp not only the facts, but the significance of these facts for our lives. Now, in Genesis chapter 29, we've begun looking at Jacob prospering in Padan Aram. We've seen that Isaac was sojourning and troubled by the Philistines, that Esau had married the Hittite women back in chapter 26, chapters 27 and 28, that Jacob had that deception of Isaac concerning the birthright, that he secured the blessing of his father, that is, and that Jacob then went to Padan Aram. Remember, his mother probably rightly surmised that his brother Esau would be very angry, and until his anger is assuaged or calms down a little bit, it would be best for him to flee, and he does that. So in chapters 32, or in 29, 30, and 31, we have Jacob prospering in Padan Aram. In the beginning of chapter 29 here, we saw that Leah's eyes were tender, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had to her. We see in these verses the trickery of Laban. It was very clear to him why Jacob was serving. He was serving for Rachel. In fact, he specifically asks for that. I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, and to make it doubly clear, he says, thy younger daughter. So we have to take Laban as a deceptive, somewhat dishonest, trickery-oriented father-in-law. But Jacob served the time. It went by quickly due to his love, and that's another good lesson for us. If we love what we're doing and who we're doing it with, the time is going to pass very, very quickly. In verse 21, Jacob said unto Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave Zilpah, his handmaid, unto his daughter Leah for a handmaid. It came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is this that thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? The word beguiled, again, tricked, deceived. Jacob knew right away what had happened, and that Laban was responsible for it. These events are, I think, difficult for modern day people many times to understand because of the differences in the culture. It was very, very common in that part of the world, although certainly not a binding necessity, that the oldest daughter would be married off first. But that certainly was not required, and Jacob had specifically made a requested exception there. Laban said, it is not so done in our place to give the younger before the firstborn. Well, that's a half-truth. Again, typical of Laban. It is done, although some of the cultures of that day and in that area did that to one extent or another. He says, fulfill the week of this one, and we will give thee the other also for the service which thou shalt give with me yet 7 other years. What's he saying? Serve 7 more years and you can have Rachel as well. And Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife. So the idea, the agreement is you can have her after 1 week, but you're going to work 7 years in return. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah his handmaid to be her handmaid, and he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. Can you see the problems coming? You see the deception and the unsteady ground that this family is built on? Going to be a lot of problems, a lot of heartache, jealousy. We're going to see in the family of Jacob, who will have 12 sons. And we honor the patriarchs, and we recognize what an important role they played in the coming of Christ. Still, the treachery in that family must have been a miserable a very unhappy family in many ways and at many times because of man getting his ideas ahead of God's. Instead of just relying on God and saying, you know, with God, he's going to make things work out in a way that will be very, very successful. But we see favoritism, loving Rachel more than Leah, and we're going to find that that's going to pose a lot of heartache, really, for both of them. Verse 31, and Jehovah saw that Leah was hated. Now, the word hated is used in a couple of different senses in the Bible. It can mean, of course, active ill will toward someone. But what else does the word hate in the Bible as a verb sometimes mean? Unloved, okay. I would say that she was loved, wouldn't you? But all right, good commentary passage. Remember, Jesus said, he that cometh after me and hateth not his own brother and sister, his mother and father, yea, his own life also. So what does the word hate mean in that passage? Pardon me? A preference? Yeah, a preference. I would put it this way, loved less. Jesus is not saying we are to actively have ill will towards our physical family. He is saying that you are to love them less than you love me. That is, don't allow your family ties and affections to come before me. It's great to have good, strong families, physical families, but that they can become a stumbling block. You know that? For our service to Christ, if we're not careful. Jesus says we have to love them less. And I think that's the meaning of the word here. When he says, God saw that Leah was hated, that is, she was not being honored or loved to the extent that Rachel was. I don't think we need to conclude that Jacob was actively hating her or abusing her. But God says he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Now, here again, we've seen this before. We saw it with Sarah. The privilege of childbirth is something in which God is involved, it is interested. We've seen the barrenness or the inability of certain women in the scriptural narrative to have children, that God notices that and sometimes intervenes, as he does here. And Leah conceived, verse 32, and bare a son. She called his name Reuben. This is chapter 29 of Genesis, verse 32. What does the name Reuben mean? Her firstborn, eldest. What does that mean? The name. What's your footnote say? See a son. S-E-E. See a son. And thus the name is given to him, Reuben. And she called his name Reuben, for she said, because Jehovah hath looked upon my affliction. That is, he has seen that I'm afflicted. Afflicted how? Well, loved less than Rachel. Notice how God noticed that and had compassion on her in that situation. It wasn't Leah's doing. This was all contrived by others, and then she was sort of inserted into it. And by the way, we're going to see that the daughters of Laban, Leah and Rachel, they don't appreciate this in the long run. They feel like pawns. They kind of feel like they're just being used by their dad, which in reality is what really was happening. But she calls his name Reuben, saying, God hath looked upon my affliction, for now my husband will love me. So what was her hope in having a son? Not a real great reason to have a child, is it? Well, this will make my husband love me. You ever heard of couples that were having marital difficulties and they basically reason that way? Well, let's have a child. That'll patch things up. That's not a good reason to have a child. But she's hoping that things will improve. Now my husband will love me. And she conceived again, verse 33, and bare a son, and said, because Jehovah hath heard that I am hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. So that's verse 33. What does the name Simeon mean? Heard. Heard. Okay. Verse 34. And she conceived again and bare a son and said, now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Levi. Joined, bound. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, this time will I praise Jehovah. Therefore she called his name Judah. What's the name Judah mean? Praise. And she left off bearing. That is, she was no longer actively pursuing the goal of having children. Now, Judah, what is significant about Judah among the 12? Yeah, this is the tribe or the son through whom the Christ will come. The Lion of Judah. All right. So God has not forgotten, not for a moment, the purpose of all of this. Again, leading to Jesus Christ. Any question down through verse 35? John.
It seems like in these families that since there are multiple wives, that bearing a son was very significant, because that son, the oldest son, was the one on whom she depended when perhaps her husband died. If we look at Laban, he was the one who took over when the servant came to find a wife for Isaac.
Okay. The prominence of the firstborn, and particularly the priority of having a son in order to assist and bear the family forward. Yes, exactly. Anybody else? Questions down through the end of chapter 29? Comments? All right. Now, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ann.
It seems to be that Judah has met his match in Laban. You know, he was a deceiver, and he experienced that, and then it was harder for him because he was deceived by Laban
Yeah, Jacob.
and had to stay in that.
Exactly. And Laban has met his match. He's going to find that Jacob is someone to be reckoned with. Exactly. These two men of great determination. At first, Jacob seems to be somewhat passive, going along with it, because it coincided with God's plan anyway. But there's going to come a time where Jacob's going to stand up to Laban and say, look, you've wronged me for the last time. Good. Anything else? Don?
I was just thinking about last week when we saw God appear to Jacob on the way to Padan-Aram, and we were talking about the reason why God showed up there. Jacob was going to a pagan family.
Yeah.
The family of Rachel, they still had their household gods.
Yes.
And that became an issue when Jacob tried to go back to Canaan.
Exactly. We need to remember that this family is not coming from a Jehovah background. There was foreign gods that they were worshiping. It takes some time. Well, it took some time for Jacob to come out of that. And now we're going to see that the same thing was true with Laban, only we don't see him coming out of it, but persisting in it, and his daughter, Rachel. All right, look at the next verse, chapter 30, verse 1. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister. She said unto Jacob, give me children, or else I die. So look at the envy now and the strife. Think of the relationship between these two women. And think of the stress upon Jacob, trying to please them and satisfy them and work with them. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? What's he saying there? That's a rhetorical question whose answer is obvious. What's he saying?
Am I the one in charge of giving you children or God?
Right, and which implies that who is in charge? God is in charge. Am I God? I can't control you having children or not. This may have been, again, a sort of a swipe at her superstitious background, that he could somehow influence that, and we're going to see some further evidence of that as we go. But he's saying, I have absolutely no control of that, and he's angry at the suggestion. And she said, behold, my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, that she may bear upon my knees, and I also may obtain children by her. Now here's Rachel sitting there like a queen, doling out the various women and basically controlling to whom her husband will have access for the purpose of bearing children. And she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife, and Jacob went in unto her. And Bilhah conceived, verse 5, and bare Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan. What does the name Dan suggest? Judge. Right, 8. And Rachel said, 7. And Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, conceived again, and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, with mighty wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali, to prevail. All right, so again, setting up further contention and ill will in the family, but now we're up to 6 sons to Jacob. When Leah saw that she had left off bearing, she took Zilpah, her handmaid, and gave her to Jacob to wife. And Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, bare Jacob a son, and Leah said, fortunate. And she called his name Gad. The name Gad, of course, means fortune. And Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, bare Jacob a second son, and Leah said, happy am I, for the daughters will call me happy. And she called his name Asher. And the name Asher, of course, means happy. And Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them unto his mother Leah. The mandrakes seemed, at that time in the culture, it seems that they were regarded as sort of an aid to fertility. Yes.
You missed verses 10 through 13.
I did? I sure did. No, I didn't. Thank you. I'm glad you're keeping me straight, but keep me straight now. Don't make me crooked. I got enough trouble. Thank you, Chris. And Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest, found mandrakes. So these mandrakes are intended to make one fertile, to aid in or to assist in fertility. There's no scientific evidence of that. That was a superstition of the day. But we're going to see that this has caused, again, further contention. Brought them unto his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. So Rachel must have believed the superstition. She must have figured, well, this is how Leah is doing it. And if I could partake of these mandrakes, I would be more fertile. So you have a competition going between these two wives. And she said unto her, this is Leah speaking to Rachel, Is it a small matter that thou hast taken away my husband, and wouldst thou take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, Therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. What's Rachel's solution? Again, she's the queen. She's doling them out. To Leah, she says, you can what? Well, you can lie with Jacob, my husband, in return for the mandrakes. You see the perverted thinking there? Rachel said, Therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. And Jacob came from the field in the... Did anybody have a translation that says something other than mandrakes? Or do they all say mandrakes? I guess they all say mandrakes. Okay, verse 16, And Jacob came from the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, Thou must come in unto me, for I have surely hired thee with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. So this was like an obligation now because she had paid for it. And so Jacob honors the obligation, and it's almost like a contract or a debt. Now verse 17, God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob a fifth son. It's interesting to me that in all of this trickery and unwholesome competition, God is still there working out his plan. Sometimes God works through people, and always through imperfect people, working out his arrangement. And Leah said, God hath given me my hire, because I gave my handmaid to my husband, and she called his name Issachar. So that's verse 18. Verse 19, And Leah conceived again and bare a sixth son to Jacob. And Leah said, God hath endowed me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. And she called his name Zebulun. And afterwards she bare a daughter and called her name Dinah. Now somebody asked, were there any other daughters? Well, if there were, they're not specifically mentioned. Why do you think Dinah is specifically mentioned, if that's the case? It's going to be a problem later. Her story is going to play into the purpose of the narrative. There are many things happening that we're not told about because they really are not relevant to the narrative. We have to remember that. I'm not saying there were other daughters, but it wouldn't surprise me if there were. So we don't need to really know that. Verse 22, And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bare a son and said, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, saying, Jehovah add to me another son. Joseph is going to, of course, be the main character of the book and will eventually provide, remember, the salvation to his people from their Egyptian bondage. So this is very significant. And it would seem that Jacob not only loved Rachel the most, but that affection then was transferred to her son, or their son, Joseph. So you have a rivalry between the sons that's carried on down. All right, verse 25 on the screen. Before we get to that, let me share this chart with you here. Descendants of Jacob. This may be helpful when you look at, again, where we're going with the genealogy here. You have Jacob, and he's married, first of all, to Leah, but then also to Bilhah, and to Zilpah, and to Rachel. So 4 wives, the primary, the secondary, and the 2 concubines. Now look at the descendants of Leah: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. And those four were born in, it would appear, rather rapid succession before any of the others. Then Issachar and Zebulun. Those are the 6 sons of Leah. Who else did she bear? Dinah. I have the females in white rectangles there with the red outline. Bilhah bore Dan and Naphtali. Zilpah bore Gad and Asher. And then, of course, Rachel bore Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph and Benjamin. Now, there you have the 12 patriarchs as well as Dinah listed. But thinking now about Judah, remember we said through Judah would come the Messiah. If you go on down from Judah, you're going to find Perez and Zerah, and under Perez, Hezron, and under Hezron would be Ram, or Arni, and under him, Amminadab. Under Amminadab is Nashon, or Nashon, under him Salmon, then Boaz, then Obed, then Jesse, then David. Okay? So there's your priestly or your royal line of descendants through Judah. And if you go into Matthew and read the account of Jesus' genealogy, those names are going to appear for you. Any questions on that or thoughts? All right. Now moving forward into verse 25, chapter 30, verse 25. And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, Send me away that I may go unto mine own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service wherewith I have served thee. And Laban said unto him, If now I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry. For I have divined that Jehovah hath blessed me for thy sake. Now stop. What's he saying? What is Laban saying there? For I have divined that Jehovah hath blessed me for thy sake.
It's my benefit to have you around.
Okay, it's certainly to my benefit. You've been good for me. I don't want you to leave, tarry or stay. But he's saying more than that. What's in the word divined?
Superstitiously determined.
Yeah. Again, through the use of his divination tools or these, what are they called? The terebinths, the little gods that were often carved in the image of people, and they used them, they thought, to bring protection and although this is one that he could have seen, a blind man could have seen this without any kind of superstitious tools, that God is mighty good to Jacob. So things were going well, and Laban recognized that, and he says, don't leave. Yes, Joy.
It's interesting in Turkish culture, they will oftentimes read the coffee mugs, like what's left after you consume coffee to tell your fortune, and it's kind of, it goes along with this type of
Yes.
thing. It still exists in parts of the world where they still practice a lot of the same things, and even some of the names, I noticed as we were going through some of the names that you, descendants of Judah, some of the names are still prominent, like Salmon is still commonly
Yes,
found.
okay. So your first point first. The Joy points out the reading of the cup or the divining of the mugs, the coffee cups or the mugs. Yes, still practiced in many of these eastern lands. They believed that they could tell the future in that way, yes. And she also mentioned there that a lot of those names are still in common parlance. Exactly. All right. So I have divined that Jehovah hath blessed me for thy sake. And he said, appoint me thy wages and I'll give it. In other words, you just name your price. whatever your salary is to be, and I'll pay it. And he said unto him, Thou knowest how I have served thee, and how my cattle have fared with me. It says, Thy cattle have fared with me. Verse 30, For it was little which thou hadst before I came, and it hath increased unto a multitude, and Jehovah hath blessed thee whithersoever I turn. And now when shall I provide for mine own house also? And he said, What shall I give thee? And Jacob said, Thou shalt not give me aught, that is, anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed thy flock and keep it. I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence every speckled and spotted one, and every black one among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. So what's he saying? Your flock, I will go through it, and I'll pull out the speckled, the spotted, the ringed. Did you ever see a beef cow that is ringed, has a ring around it? Okay, that's considered Jacob's cattle. And spotted or speckled. In other words, I'm going to leave you with just the pure and clean, the best species to look at visually. What's the black sheep of the family mean? The outcast. And here again, if there's any sheep that are black, I'll take those. That'll be my hire. Well, what would you, if you were Laban, what would you think? You want this guy at any cost. Yeah, man, he's going to purge out my flock for me and get rid of all of the undesirables. And that's what his salary will be. You got yourself a deal, says Laban. That'll be your hire. Verse 33, so shall my righteousness answer for me hereafter when thou shalt come concerning my hire, that is before thee. Every one that's not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the sheep, that if found with me shall be counted stolen. Now notice how he's proposing separating himself. Probably 50 miles or so, the way this will work out. We're not going to be together. I'm going to take the undesirables and I'm going to go over here. You keep the best of the cattle, in quotes, over here. And if any of yours are found with me, that'll be considered stolen. All right? And Laban said, Behold, I would it might be according to thy word. In other words, I want it that way. Sounds like a good deal. Once again, he thinks that the proposal that Jacob is making is to his best interest, to Laban's best interest. And he removed that day the he-goats that were ring-streaked and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white in it, and all the black ones among the sheep, gave them into the hand of his sons, and he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flock. I think 3-day journey would be about 50 miles. That's the reason I said 50. But whatever it is, there's a physical distance between them to ensure that they each maintain their distance and they're going forward. All right. Now, how many cattle breeders do we have in the room? Yeah, and any of you ever breed cattle? Oh, rats! Okay, Johnny. You've done some of that, have you? Tell us about it.
Well, I mean, as a kid, we had a farm with cattle.
It's a whole science, isn't it? There's a lot to it. You're going to love these next few verses. And Jacob took him rods of fresh poplar and of the almond, of the plane tree, and peeled white. By the way, the plane tree, what do you have in your other translation there? What is that? Chestnut? Okay. Anybody have something else? Poplar? Okay. Sometimes I think you'll see sycamore. These are just different breeds of trees. And peeled white streaks in them and made the white appear, which was in the rods. So if you take the bark off of those branches or rods, it's going to look white there where you've peeled that back, okay? And he set the rods, which he had peeled, over against the flocks in the gutters, in the water troughs where the flocks came to drink, and they conceived when they came to drink. That is, when the cattle would come together is when they would have sexual intercourse. And that's where he put the rods, okay? Now, is there any proof that any of this works? Well, if there is, I haven't seen it. I haven't read it. I don't know about it. This appears to be superstition, kind of like the mandrakes, okay? So who is behind it? Who's going to make sure that this works? God. God, and that's the point we need to understand. God's providentially blessing Jacob. He's going to make sure that Jacob is going to prosper, even with the cast-offs. He's going to really do well. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth ring streaks, speckled and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring streaked, and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart, and put them not unto Laban's flock. And it came to pass, whensoever the stronger of the flock did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the flock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the flock were feeble, he put them not in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. See, selective breeding, Johnny. We're picking the best. We're going to breed them and build the herd that way. And the man increased exceedingly, and had large flocks, and maidservants, and men servants, and camels, and asses. And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before time. And Jehovah said unto Jacob, Return unto the land of thy fathers, and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. What are the three reasons that Jacob decides to leave Padanaram and go back to his homeland? Number one. What was it? Oh, well, that's number three. That's good. That's the best one. But what's the first one? Look at the text. The first reason is these sons are saying ominous things about me. He heard them saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's. And that is the reason he's prospering, is because he stole that from our father. That's number one. This is a good time to think about leaving. Number two is what? Yeah, Laban has changed. Look at him. He doesn't treat me nice anymore. He speaks mean to me. Or in his words, he beheld the countenance of Laban. Behold, it was not toward him as before time. You know, you can tell sometimes the way a person looks at you, if you've known them well over time, that something has changed. Jacob picked up on that. And then the third reason, which is the main reason, is that God told him. Look at verse 3. Jehovah said, Return unto the land of thy fathers, and to thy kindred, and I'll be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before time, but the God of my father hath been with me. Now, normally, had this been a functional family, what would Jacob have been fearful of in telling these girls that, or his wives, about their father? Well, they might side with their father. This might actually create division between them and Jacob, but that's not what happens. Notice the next verse. And you know that with all my power I've served your father. And your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. The number 10 is sometimes used to refer to a multiplicity. And it may be that he's saying he's done it many, many times. Or there could have actually been 10 different times that they're not all recorded. But God suffered him not to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the flock bear speckled. If he said thus, the ring streak shall be thy wages, then bear all the flock ring streak. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. What is he teaching these ladies? God is in control, not these heathen gods that you all have been raised with. See, that's a key point. But Jehovah God is in control. He's the one that's blessing me. And he knew that they were going to stand up for what was right at this point. All right, look, we've got to stop there because we're out of time. We'll plan to take up at that point next week, Lord willing. Thank you so much for your time today.